Good morning.
Morning.
Lauren, were you able to submit all the paperwork?
Not yet. I'm waiting for Ian's package to
Oh,
be
right.
with his signature.
Gotcha.
I should be getting that any day now.
Perfect.
I have my package all ready to go.
Awesome. I'm sure you'll be able to send it out by next week.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, we still have some people coming in.
Pretty adamant about 6th grade.
Good morning, Debbie. It's nice to see
Morning.
you. Ever met?
No, we haven't.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yep.
I've got some people coming in. Good morning to everyone that just came in. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Any plans for the weekend, you guys?
Try not to melt.
There you go. I know. How's the weather like over there in Northern California, by the way?
It's actually very pleasant. I'm just complaining because it's Northern California. It's like 70 degrees here right now.
Are
So
you serious?
yeah, it's actually
San
very.
Francisco or something.
Yeah, I'm in El Cerrito, so right across the water. So it's
Okay,
actually
stop complaining.
yeah. Here's outside, so it's pretty not bad.
I'm in the Central Valley, just east of Livermore, and we're at almost 90 already.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I heard yesterday it was like 105 in Sacramento and Concord. So
We
Yep.
would normally be going to our lake house for the weekend, but it's supposed to be 119 today in
Yeah,
Marvin.
Whoa.
Ouch.
So my wife made the decision to stay home and beat the heat.
Sounds a lot better.
Yeah, probably smart.
That
Uh-huh.
Wow,
119
119.
sounds,
Holy
the hottest it's ever been there is 111.
Wow.
Wow, that crushed it. Oh my gosh.
And 111 is pretty
Yeah, I
tough.
can imagine.
You want to be
Where is it?
indoors.
Where is it? Which
Where
place?
is it, Lauren? What city
that?
is it in? What city is it?
It's a rural agricultural community called Arvin, Arvin, and
Oh.
it's just at the base of the Tehachapi Mountains, just south of Bakersfield.
Yeah, just before you go over the grapevine, right? Kind of,
Over
sort
the
of.
grapevine towards LA, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Youch. All right. Should we get started? Do we have pretty much everyone that's going to be here?
I think we're good, yeah.
Probably. Sadly, I wish everyone were here because this is going to be good.
Uh-huh.
We'll
Okay.
see. Yet to be determined.
I'm sure that's not
So
bad.
thanks everyone for making it here to the presentation. Hopefully this is helpful for everybody. A couple of notes before we start. I'm assuming that people know how to do a recast, or most people understand the concept of a recast at this point and comparables. And so one of the let me see here. I made a little list here. So it's a pretty simple process, but it's a lot of work preparing for it. So obviously, before you get started on a PeerComps valuation, you want to have your recast completed. And if you want to do projections, also have that kind of done as well. So annualizations or anything like that. You also want to have a balance sheet, and you want to make sure that balance sheet matches the last or the most recent P&L or tax return that you're using. Okay, so you don't want to use a balance sheet from a different period than the P&L or tax return, the most recent one that you're using for the valuation. The third thing you want to do, and this is kind of optional, is you want to go to First Research and pull one of the industry reports if you can, and just read up on the industry a little bit, understand challenges, maybe some of the, and actually I hadn't done this in a long time. For those of you that are telemarketing, it actually, if you're targeting an industry that you're not familiar with, this will actually give you some talking points for your calls. So I pulled this report for the example we're going to do, but just to show you very quickly, at the bottom of these, they have, maybe I missed it here, but there are templates, industry right here. So this will actually give you some talking points for call prep questions. How does the company manage declines, blah, blah, blah. So you can read up on this and perhaps be a little bit smarter on your telemarketing calls if you're targeting an industry that you don't know, or even an industry that you're familiar with. You might get some nice tidbits out of this report.
And
I
Jack,
think,
which specific industry report is this one you're
this
using?
one I pulled for furniture manufacturing.
This is the one that we have easy access to through.
Correct.
This is the one that's through
First Research.
IBBA.
Yes, correct. M&A source, I think.
M&A source.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So very good resource. I forget to use it a lot. And so just make sure you know that we have this, and once again, you can go in there. There's tons of information, probably more than you ever want to know about an industry, but it could be helpful for you. All right. So now that we have all three of these, and I think Charlene actually sent out a directions on how to pull these reports. So if you don't have it, I think Charlene should have something that she can send you. I actually found an old email that she sent out. All right. So now that we have all three of these items, so here's the recast that I prepared. And then let me see, here's the balance sheet that I used. And I'll send all of this to Charlene afterwards. So if you guys want to practice on the same one, you can, but I would recommend, just doing this on any kind of listing or whatever that you guys are working on. So at least make use of, your practice. But the PeerComps stuff is actually pretty straightforward as long as you have all the correct data. I think that's the hard part about it. Everything else is just kind of plugging in numbers and so on. Okay, so let's log into PeerComps.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
On the interim statements, so that doesn't have a problem. You don't have to put in year end, but just the most common, current.
You mean year end? Well, on this one, they will have a place for you to put partial years. And then you can indicate which one you want to utilize. And then you can actually, I believe they allow you to annualize that if you want as well.
Or was the question referring to the balance sheet? Because you had made a comment that you wanted to get a balance sheet from the most recent period.
Oh, correct. Well, I want a balance sheet that matches the most recent period of financials that they share with me. So if I'm doing this to April 30th, I want to make sure I have the P&L to April 30th as well as the balance sheet as of April 30th. I don't want to use a balance sheet that's March 31st or anything like that. It'll just, the system will still spit out a opinion of value. It's not a problem for it to do that, but it might be just off a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so you just want to make sure the balance sheet that you're using matches the most current financials you're using. So if you're using, just tax returns, then you'd want to use the tax returns balance sheets. Answer the question?
Yes.
Hopefully? Okay, great. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do in PeerComps is we're going to want to prepare a actually let me I'll create a second one. You want to create a PeerComps comparable. So up here, you want to start with a comparable. You can see if someone else has pulled a comparable for your particular industry already, but I prefer just pulling a brand new one. I think at some point we should probably come in here and clean out some of these because I don't think people are going to be using, comp that they pulled in 2018 at this point. So we'll probably have to clean that up.
I would agree with that.
Same thing like our right signature thing. It's starting to, here's the.
Sorry for joining the meeting late, guys. It's Roy in Sacramento. Thank you
Hey,
for sharing the information with us, Jack.
No worries.
Everyone's having a good day.
Hey, Jack, I don't know if everybody's used this or knows the policy about, the Google Drive registration, but it might be worth mentioning that because in the beginning, I was on and I got kicked off and lost data a bunch of times.
Correct.
And very quickly learned to put in the entire thing, skip the financial piece, and then go back and enter the financials because I wasted hours.
Correct. Yeah. So everybody, we do have a sign up sheet. Let me shrink this for, wow, this is giant. A sign up sheet for PeerComps because there can only be one user on PeerComps at a time. And so if let's say I'm starting this valuation and someone jumps on while I'm still working on it, it won't let me know that, someone has taken over access. It'll let me finish whatever I'm doing. And when I click next or save, it'll tell me, oh, you need to log in again. And basically everything I've inputted is deleted. Yeah. So make sure, I think everybody in the company has access to this sheet. So make sure if you're just going to do this on the fly, make sure you check this first and make sure nobody else is on it. Or if you know that you're going to be doing this down the road sometime, make sure you just plug it in and put your name there and make sure that people know.
So
I actually forgot to do it this morning. So,
so you're going to show us as you get started here, when is the first chance you have to save your work so you don't lose it?
Yeah, I was looking for that. I don't think there is a way to save your work unless you finish the whole report and then go back into it. And I'll that's, that's the one thing that makes it extra challenging is there's no like save as you go option on there, I don't believe, or at least I haven't found one. So while we're working on this, if you see it somewhere, let me know.
Hey, Jack, this is Roy. I got a question for you though. In what is your recommendation? I mean, do you do this for a $1 to $20 million company, or would you do something like this for a $500,000 to $700,000 company? And because I've used this, I love it, but I wouldn't use it on a $500,000 to $700,000 company. Am I wrong?
I would probably on a smaller business, I would probably use PeerComps.
Okay.
I think PeerComps data wise, you have a lot more data points, and but their businesses are going to be, you know, smaller size businesses. You're not going to find a ton of, you know, 10, $20 million sales companies there. But if you're looking for, and it also depends on what industry you're looking in. I actually will look in both places just to see where I can get enough comps, which one has the best amount of comps I can use. And sometimes I use this purely for comps. I don't produce a full report. I typically do this when when someone's paying me to do the opinion of value, or two, it's really kind of someone that I know would like something like, because I think most clients will look at this and they don't read the majority of it. You know, they'll look at the numbers, flip to the last page. Oh, this is how much it's worth. So that's kind of, you know, so I don't spend, and sometimes for certain businesses, you just create more questions than you want, right?
Okay.
They'll start asking you, why don't you use the equipment replacement, asset replacement valuation method? And we're not, you know, we're not qualified to do that, right? I don't know how much a Heidelberg is worth from 1986 that's still being used. I don't know how much that can be valued at, and I don't know how much you can buy one for. And for the most part, people are looking at these based on a cash flow or market analysis, and so that's kind of what we want to present. I don't want to get into a situation where he's like, oh, my machine's worth $1 million, you know, but you're saying it's worth $500,000. Why? I don't know, you know.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. So the company that we're going to be using is a cabinet manufacturer. Okay. Oops. Where is it? ABC Cabinets. All right. And this is, wait a second. Nope, that's a different company. Oh, and the recast I have open already. Here we go. Okay. So I did the recast here based on.
Jack, are they a cabinet manufacturer?
In reality, they're a manufacturer and installation.
I just did a recast on a very same company here in Southern California, and we're just getting the listing.
Okay, great. Well, this might help you out.
Thank you.
So, you know, we had tax returns for 3 years and then 4 months information for the current year. And one of the things that I know about the business is it's somewhat seasonal. They do go through a bit of a lull during the winter time. And so I chose not to annualize the numbers. I actually asked the owners, this was an old valuation I did, but I asked the owners for a trailing 12 and they never produced it. But for something like this, when I know that it's seasonal, I wouldn't just, you know, 4 months, multiply it by 3 and try to annualize it, because this, if you look at their numbers through the first 4 months, they're rather slow. But if you look at the prior years, they're growing nicely and income is growing nicely as well. So I don't want to just do a straight line projection or annualization, which will give them, it will really kind of undersell the business here, undervalue the business. All right. So for this one, I'm using 18, 19, and 20. All right. So first you want to know which manufacturer or which industry you are. For PeerComps, they use the NAICS code. We're more familiar with the SIC codes, but the NAICS codes are a little more detailed. And so I know this one's in manufacturing, and it's 337.
A quick comment while you're searching
Yes.
it, that industry report that you pulled, Of all of the applicable SIC and NAICS codes on it.
Correct. Yeah. You can also go to OSHA if you're
Yeah.
unfamiliar, and you can find all of them there.
Yeah.
All right. So I found the industry 337110, wood kitchen cabinet countertop manufacturing. All right. So that's pretty close. There's 28 of them. Okay. So I'll check that in PeerComps. And this is after we've logged into PeerComps, signed in, logged in, and here we are. So out of the 28, here's the quick kind of statistics for you. What I like to do is try to pare this down a little bit. I think 28 comparables is a little bit too much. And so the first thing I will do for these is try to match the discretionary earnings. And so this one ranged from anywhere from 160 to 232. So I'll give it a wide range, 100 to maybe $300,000 in SDE. Sometimes I'll use sales if I can't find enough comparables based on SDE, but I always like to use SDE first. Okay, so if I apply the filters, perfect. That gave me 9 comparables. Okay, so we always want to stay somewhere around, I would say 20 is too many and 1 or 2 is too little. So we probably want somewhere between 5 to maybe 10, 15 comparables, depending on the industry. So once we found the comparables and we've pared it down, we'll click next steps.
Excuse me, Jack.
Yes.
You just compare the SDE. You just set a filter on SDE.
Correct.
What if the coming, like these result is like annual sales is really high and or either small or higher than the target company? What do? You filter, you remove them?
You know, we can. That's going to be based on your every case is going to be different. So yes, if you see something that is an outlier, so something making the same amount of money but maybe triple the amount of sales, you may want to remove that. However, I think at the end of the day, when people buy businesses, they're buying the income, they're buying the durability of that historical income. And so, you know, in my opinion, a company that's doing 10 million in the same industry, a company doing $5 million and $500,000 of income is worth virtually the same as a company that's doing $10 million and $500,000 in income, right?
Based on the multiple.
Correct. Correct.
The same. Oh, okay.
Correct. And it lends you to think I may actually prefer a business that's less sales but more income, right? I can do less work and I'm making more money from that work. And so it doesn't always mean, hey, a higher sales revenue is going to generate a higher multiple just because I have more sales. I've seen plenty of companies doing like $10 million in sales and barely squeezing out any profits, right? Because their margins are too thin. And so at the end of the day, we're always looking at discretionary earnings, the income. That's what people are going to be buying. Now, obviously, if you have a business that doesn't have any income, then you're going to have to use gross sales. But I would say if a business doesn't have any income, you probably wouldn't be doing a PeerComps for them either.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So I always like to take a look at the comparables, and I want to make sure there's no kind of outliers, right? If I notice that everything's kind of between the 2 to, you know, under 4 range, if I see one that's 15 times or 0 times or 1 times, I'll probably remove those. But if you can see, these are all relatively good comparables, right? They hover between 2.4 to 3.37. Any questions there? Uh-oh. Did I lose you guys?
Nope.
Oh, no, you guys are there? Okay.
But again,
here.
Jack, when you draw the SDE range, how big, how different?
I want to give enough of a range where I pull enough data points, right? That's what the range is for. I want to small enough. So I don't want to say, oh, it's 0 to 1 million. That'll give me too many data points. And so there's no set rule for it. I think it's based on how close those comparables are to your range, and then how many comparables you can find. So to give you an example, if I'm doing restaurants, I'm going to be able to pull hundreds and hundreds of comparables. So that's going to allow me to put a much smaller range in my comparables. If I have a lot of data points, right, I'm going to be able to pull 10 from a very small range. So I might say, oh, just between 100 to 150,000 in income, I'll probably pull enough comps for myself. If I'm doing a business that is, there's not a lot of comparables. So a chemical distributor, or like the salt business that Robert James has listed, there's not a ton of comparables for those. And so I'm going to have to widen my range, as well as potentially widen my get more general with my industry. So if I'm looking for a very niche business, you're not going to be able to find enough comparables. So you're going to have to start stepping up on your NAICS code tree. So instead of 6 digits, you might use 5 digits. And if you don't pull enough comparables there, you go down to 4 digits. And then if you don't find enough comparables there, you go down to the 3. So every digit behind these 33. So 33 is the manufacturing. 7 is a subset of that manufacturing, and then it goes down into more detail. And so if I'm not pulling enough comparables at the 37111 110, I'll go down to 33711, go down to 3371, and then if I have to, I'll take the major code, which is 33. Okay, so all of manufacturing, but that becomes a little less unique to your business. But yes, there's no set. The key to the comparables is finding enough comparables. And so your filters need to be able to filter out enough comparables so you're not left with 20, but also give you enough data points so you can have enough to do a comparable. And I would say 5 is probably minimum, and you don't want to do probably more than 10.
Right. So if the comparables, like if your target company is a 200,000 SDE, and you come up with the comparables like just say 500,000 or 600,000, you don't consider that's off the range.
It only depends on if we have enough comparables in that. Now, if we start to get too far outside of the range, so I'm at 200,000 and I'm only getting comparables of 5 or 600,000, then I'll start shrinking that NAICS code.
Got it.
Okay. And then I'm going to try to get it as close to the SDE, but also enough data points. So this is more of an art than a science. It's not going to be two people doing comparables on the same business may come out with slightly different valuations, but they'll be close. I'm going to say they're probably typically between 10%, 15%. So you're using mostly the same data points as long as you're filtering them properly.
Prior consulting, and you are doing these PeerComps for those who are willing to pay. I guess my question is, are they looking for apple-to-apple comparison? For example, in this example that you're sharing with us, that database might include other manufacturers, but not necessarily those verticals that play in this field. Do you disclose all that with your client? I mean, so you tell them that, hey, I found 5, but I know that we wanted to get 15. Does that confuse them a little bit? Do you disclose that?
Yeah. So that's I'll go over our method, right? I'll say, hey, if we find comparables that are anomalies, so something that sold for 12 times when everything else is selling for 2 to 3, we remove those. I think the number of comparables is something that you want to control. When you have too many comparables, it's just too many data points. And it becomes, I always say at some point, everything kind of reverts to the mean, right? Once you have enough data points, you always kind of revert back to the average. And so we want to have enough. That's why we can't only have 2, right? It's hard to average something when you have 2, but you also don't need 20 or 30 data points, because when you do that, they're going to start to nitpick every single one. Oh, well, this one was sold in 2014, so it's too old. This one was sold, and so we can produce all that. I don't think it adds that much more value to someone. I think that's just data overload. I think the quality of your comparables matters, right? So if you're doing a, let's say a bar listing and you're pulling comparables for restaurants, that's going to raise some questions, right? They're going to say, well, this is outside of my industry. So I think as long as you have comparables that are close, then it should be good. So if you look at this, there's a couple of comparables that are very, very close to kind of what these guys are doing, right? 7 to 900,000, making 100. And these guys are a lot more profitable than some of these other ones. So I would want to know, why are you guys able to squeeze out so much more profit than some of the, someone needs $1 million or $2 million to make the same amount of profits. And there might be a story behind that. So what I know about this company, the reason why they're so high profit is they also do the finishing of the cabinets themselves. And the finishing work is apparently extremely high profit. And so they brought that in-house, and that's why their margins is a lot better. They're not just the manufacturing of the cabinets, they actually do the finishing of them too. And so that's where they make the extra money on, in this company at least. They do installations as well, but very little of it.
Good.
All right.
Hey, Jack, I have two quick comments, if I may.
Sure.
Number one, there is an entire IBBA class on selecting appropriate comparables. It's a really good class. It's in the CBI track. I highly recommend it. I think it's 210 or something like that. I forget. But there are all kinds of things. Like one of the things you can look at, if you notice on the screen, Jack has one of the columns there is coefficient of variation. That helps talk to the accuracy of that particular comparable to what you're trying to do. There's the regression R squared, which we see when we graph the thing. So there's all of that. Okay, excellent class. Please take it at some point. Second thing is with all of this valuation stuff. A long time ago, I read a definition of valuation, which is coming up with an estimate of the most probable selling price that you can support how you got there. So you can say, these are the comparables I used. These are why I thought they worked pretty well. But then in the end, as Jack says, it does come down to an art rather than a science. But you can at least point back and say, this is how I got here.
Right. Like I said, you always want to have data for your argument, right? So even if you're presenting offers and you're making an offer, data is hard to argue with, right? If you can produce the right data. Yes, and picking the right data is also something that comes with experience. So I think the more you guys do this, you'll just be more familiar with it. Nowadays I can look at a comparable and know whether or not it's even in line with something else, and I'm able to pick out outliers and things like that pretty quickly.
Okay,
all
great.
right.
Thank
All
you.
right. So now that we have a comparable set, we'll save this. Okay, and we'll want to give it a name. Make sure you give it a name that's easy for you to find. So since we have so many on there, but I'll just name this PeerComps training. PeerComps comparable. I'm going to go down and delete the other one I created. Okay, so now the comparable that you did will show up here, I believe, all the way at the bottom. Oh, no, comp searches. Okay, so comp searches right here. I wish they had a better interface for this. It makes very little sense the way they do it, but oh wow, it's good to see we did a lot of comps. Geez, wow, 2021. All right, so we're at the very bottom here. Let me I can't even delete this. Okay, so here's the comp report. If you click on it, so if you're just doing a quick comparable search, you can just print this out and share it with your client, and you can do it that way if you want. Okay, without a whole report, but this will give you the snapshot of all the comparables, and this is really where the valuation or the where it's valuable for people, right? No one has this kind of data. We have access to it. So anyone can do a recast, anyone can do all those things, but they can't pull the data necessary. So this is really where the value is in what we provide. Okay. All right, so now that we have the comparable, we can start our PeerComps valuation. Okay. So we'll come up here, you go add new valuation. So ABC cabinets, type of business, cabinet manufacturing, NAICS 337110. Where were they? Santa Rosa. And it would be helpful if you had like a business fact sheet already completed as well during this time. But I know a lot of times we don't have that done until we're actually signing the listing, but that has a lot of good information on there that that you could use.
Where did you click to get on that page?
Oh, here. So here, I'll start. So when you log into PeerComps, this is what you're going to see. Oh, did someone lock me out? Oh no, dashboard. Okay, so when you log in, this is usually the first thing you see, and you can do the comp or you can do the valuation. So when we first started, we did the comp search, and then now we're on to the add new valuation.
And the comp search has been saved.
Yep, it's on the very, very bottom, and we'll be able to pull from it later in this report. So business to be valued, ABC cabinets, cabinet manufacturing, 337110, Santa Rosa. Last year fully analyzed. So the last full year we have is 2020. Years in business, 31, your name. Okay. So you can put some notes in here. I would say if someone is paying you to do this, you may want to put something in here. If I'm just doing a quick opinion of value to get a listing, I don't really worry about this too much. But for instance, this has steady growth, steady year-on-year growth, high profitability compared industry, long-term employees, 6. Contract. All right, so that's some of the pros and cons. Once again, you know, it's up to you what you want to put in there. All right, so here's where it gets a little more interesting. So this is going to ask you for some of the information off of the balance sheet. So this is where we go to the balance sheet and you'll say, all right, how much cash do we have? 6. AR, no AR, no inventory.
Jack, when you say no AR, does that mean what's included in the deal? Or
no, they don't have AR in there.
Ah, okay.
So if you're looking on the balance sheet, they only have AP.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So apparently they get paid upon delivery or paid ahead of time. I can't remember how it worked.
Okay. Can I just ask?
Yes.
This is Roy in San Jose. Well, you have customer deposits. I'm pretty sure you would have that in this type of business.
Yeah. This is the balance sheet that they provided, which is pretty minimal. But yes, I would expect they should have some deposits or some AR and AP typically in these businesses. I forgot why they don't.
Something you might want to consider with the balance sheet is that rather than using just the balance sheet that he gave you on April 30th there, you might want to recast the balance sheet to, as they talk about in the stock purchase agreement, to reflect the seller, well, the party's intent as to what will still be there at close of escrow. For example, on this one, they've got the PPP loan under long-term liabilities. That's not going to go to the buyer. And similarly, the cash up in the current assets probably is not going to go to the
He
buyer.
had me so numbed up and there.
I did have you numbed up. That's why you're learning.
Hey, Jack, if you
Yes.
put under like asset including the sale 400,000 cash, that means this cash gonna pass on to the buyer?
Correct. So yeah, so this is kind of the terms of the sale, what you would want to include in the sale. So yeah, obviously we wouldn't include the sales. Actually, we would include some of the actually, we would usually include some receivable. I should have picked a better one. Included some receivables for working capital, but because this company doesn't have any receivables, we're going to need him to leave cash in the business. All right. So this is going to be a little bit off topic, but I should have thought about this when I was doing this. So we need to figure out what their monthly burn rate is and how quickly they get paid. And so, if they're getting paid as the jobs are completed, we need to basically include enough for at least operating for a month or so. And so a good way to do this, a quick and dirty way to do this would be basically looking at their expenses for the year, 540,000, take away his salary. So you're at roughly about, 440 divided by 12. So he needs about $36,000 a month to keep the business afloat, paying employees, paying rent, and all the other expenses. So in this transaction, we would recommend he leave about 50,000 in cash, since there's no AR. If there was AR, I would leave, equivalent to about $50,000 of AR.
Jack, could you restate your formula there? You took.
Yes. So I look at, and I do this very quickly. I mean, there's much better ways of doing this, but this is a quick way to kind of understand how much working capital you might need for a particular business. So I basically take all the deductions, all the expenses. So that came to 540,000. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I know 102 of it went to himself. Okay. So I'm going to take that out, his own salary. We can factor that in if you want, but I usually will take this out. I just want to know how much is it going to cost me to keep the business afloat if I don't have any business coming in that first month. And so that gives me about 440,000 in expenses I have to cover over a 12-month period minus my own salary. And if I divide that by 12, that gives me 36 and some change. Now, if I look at, since he doesn't have receivables, I can't look at a AR aging report, right? But if he had an AR aging report and I'm looking at the report and it shows me that most of his AR is received in 60 days, then I'm going to have to come back to him and say, hey, we're going to need to leave enough working capital in the business for someone to stay afloat for 60 days before they get paid. So it would have to be a combination of cash or cash and receivables at that point. But based on this, it seems like they get paid upon the delivery of the product. And so, you may not need as much working capital in this as something that gives terms.
Jack, this is, and I don't want to get off track, but so I've really never done it this way. If it's an SBA is doing it and throwing more money in it and increasing the loan, or my buyer is going to his accountant, his CPA, and he's doing a pro forma and he's making that recommendation. So I either got to drop the price or he's going to have to come up with 50,000. Right. Nowhere in this have I ever really done this type of analysis. I mean, do you do that? Because I've never really done that way.
I do it when I list the business, right? When I'm going to list something, I need the seller to understand what his all-in is. And this affects the net proceeds at the end of the sale, right? How so I think it's better to, well, for one, I have two theories to this. One is I want to set that number. I don't want a buyer to set that number, because guess what? When a buyer sets working capital, it's always going to be higher than they need, right? It's free money to them, right? If I'm paying the same amount of money, I'm going to want as much inventory, as much receivables as possible. And so I'm going to always be on that upper echelon. So if you let a buyer and their accountant dictate what that working capital is going to be, then they're going to err on the high side, right? They don't know the business as well as that seller does. Now, the converse is true. If you ask a seller, you're always going to get, you only need $15,000, no problem. No reason to include any more. And that's where you need to get the data, right? That's where we need the AR and aging report. If I know that you're paying all of your AP in 30 days, but it takes you 60 days to collect all your AR, I'm going to need more working capital at that point. And I think it's better to address that with them early on. And sometimes it's a collection issue. So if you address it early, they can. So when I look at working capital, that is one of the few things that can be addressed purely based on an operational efficiency, right? If you just are lax about collecting your invoices, they're all due in 30 days, but you let people stretch to 60 days, that's going to cost you money that you don't need to. And if a seller understands that, I've been able to save sellers money on this, right? I look at their business and I say, well, geez, why do you let it? You have to pay everything in 30 days, but you let everything lapse 60 days. Why? They have the cash to do it. So they don't mind, right? They have that cash flow to do it. But if they understand that how efficient you are to collect your AR, that matters when you sell your business, they're going to be much more efficient on collecting those ARs. So I've seen people improve their collection days drastically just because they know, hey, the longer I'm going, because the buyer's going to come in and think, if it takes you 60 days to collect this, it might even take me longer to collect these, right? You're not chasing them down. If the current owner can't chase down invoices, how good am I going to be at chasing these invoices? And so we want to try to keep that as close to 30 days as possible. But if I see that you're always running 60, you're going to need to include that. And that's purely from a inefficient operation standpoint, right? You're losing that money because you just don't chase those invoices well enough.
Hey, Jack, this is Jim. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Regarding your back of the envelope calc, which is a good one for, estimating what the cash requirements. If the business is one, that requires inventory, you should also factor in what the inventory purchases are on some sort of an average basis.
Absolutely. So this should be looked at in a global stance as net current items, right? So AR minus AP plus inventory. Okay. Sure. And that needs to have enough in there for someone to continue operation without digging into their own pockets or using a line of credit, right? I have a lot of sellers that are like, oh, he has a line of credit, you can just use that. It still costs money, right? When we sell a business, it has to have all the parts in the business to make it work. And so if it needs that working capital, that's kind of like gas for the car, right? I can sell you a car, but the dealership says, oh, there's no gas in the car. You're going to have to push it off. It doesn't make sense. So you got to have enough gas in the car to make it at least to the next gas station so I can fill up. So same thing with working capital. Now, when you do net current items, though, you have to realize how quickly those things turn, right? Cash is in the bank immediately, so I can actually utilize that cash to pay bills. You have to wait for receivables for 30 days typically, or some period of time. So when you're taking net current items, you also need to know how quickly someone needs to pay bills, right? So I can't take receivables in 30 days when I have bills due the next day. And so you just have to be very careful when you're looking at net current items. Sellers would always want, oh, I'm going to give them all the inventory. I'll keep all the receivables. I'll keep all the cash. But if I can't turn that inventory into cash the same day, I'm going to need some cash to run the business. So,
Jack, what I did with the sellers of Pallet Masters here recently, working with Paulo in the Sacramento office, who has a buyer who was concerned about cash flow. In the Pallet Masters deal, they're providing inventory, but no cash, no AR, no AP. So what we had the seller do was look back at the last 13 weeks. We took a full quarter. And, along the top line is income. It's basically using the deposits made to the bank account every week. And then below that were all the expenses by week when they occurred. And then down at the bottom, you've got net expenses. And then if you take the difference between cash deposits in the week which are their collections, and minus expenses, you get either a positive or a negative number. Then you look at that number as it runs along for the 13 weeks and see where it goes negative. In that case, in a simplistic model, the largest negative number would be the maximum amount of cash they would need to make it through a 13-week period, assuming the next 13 weeks kind of look like the last 13 weeks, which is not always a good assumption. But in this case, they have regular receivables. Their AR is, like $2,000 on a, $1 million, more than $1 million business. So they're collecting, every day, credit card payments and,
Yep.
checks and direct deposit to the bank.
Right.
So they have
Right.
really no receivables.
Right. Right.
And their
Now-
payables, it's like weekly payroll, and they've got a lot of expenses going out each week. So
Right.
that kind of would tell you how much cash should you have in the bank available when you take over the business at T equals 0, assuming you're going to run it at the level it's been running.
Correct. Correct. I think the key thing is we always, and this is not something that's easy to acquire. If we can get an AR and AP aging report, those are extremely helpful for
Yep.
us to
Oh, yeah.
determine this. We can always do it based on like bank statements and so on, but it gets a little more hairy to try to figure out, when we need the money. Now, also realize, depending on if your business has seasonality to it, you may be running into a season that's high, and they may need a lot more inventory at one point of the sale, and that will kind of change some of the numbers on here as well. So sometimes people have to stock up prior to, Christmas, and you'll have a lot more inventory at that time. So we'll have to account for that. But what we want to do here is kind of normalize everything on a normal situation. Much like Jim said, I don't want to factor it on the peak. I don't want to factor it on the valley. I want to do as close to the midline or the average as I can.
Hey, Jack.
Mhm.
I have a quick question.
Coming from the a little bit time years in the cabinet industry, they probably don't carry credit, and everything's paid up front.
Yeah, I would suspect that. I can't remember. This was I did this. These numbers are actually old, so the numbers that you're looking at actually came from 2020. So these are I moved the years around, but I can't remember. They had very good cash flow. I couldn't.
They're probably putting 50% down at least, or prepaying for the whole thing.
Yeah, I would say that I think they're definitely they might actually be prepay actually.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because these are all custom cabinets. So these aren't cabinets that if it doesn't work for this guy, I'm going to be able to sell it to someone else and they can install it in their home. So these are custom made cabinets. So I suspect they were taking it 100% up front, maybe even.
Yep.
Hey, Jack,
Makes sense.
I have a quick
have a
question
question.
for you, because I know I've got a quick question, because I know we've got to move on.
Sure.
But first, I'm very impressed with your, the degree of thought you've put into this. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, I followed along until up to the point where, how much per month do we need, kind of. But then the piece I missed was, how many months do we calculate that for? And I think the answer is, we're looking at a combination of inventory turns and receivable timelines and all that.
Correct. I wish I would have picked one with an AR aging report, because that would have helped determining it. So what I'm making a couple of assumptions for this is, if I start a project, the first day I come in to work and I deliver it, I get paid in 30 days for that project. So that's what I'm assuming, or that they get paid up front for the projects. Okay, so if they're getting paid up front for the projects, I may not actually need the cash. I would just need the customer deposits that are left there. But unfortunately, in this one, they had no customer deposits and no AR. So the next best thing that we can include is cash. So I'm assuming that they're very good at collecting their money, and it's 30 days. I would say in most businesses I see, you're probably looking at 45, 60. So I would feel a little bit more comfortable with 45 to 60 days of working capital, overhead. And once again, I did this in a very quick and just no real kind of thought, or not a lot of thought into it. So if they owned a property and they're overpaying themselves for rent, we want to make that adjustment in our overhead expenses as well, right?
Sure.
If they're putting in a ton of retirement funds, which I know these employee benefits are all going to him, we would remove that as well. So we
Sure.
can get to probably a lower number, but at least this will give us an idea of where that number should be. And once again, always best to start that conversation with the seller now, because they're going to look at this as a haircut down the road, right?
Right.
If we don't prepare for this now, they're going to get a haircut down the road, and it's much harder to swallow when you get it,
Right.
during due
Sure.
diligence or
So
something.
just to restate, you try to ensure that there is enough cash or quickly turnable cash stuff to operate for 60 days before you really start getting the AR and all that sort of thing.
Correct. 45 to 60 is what I would say.
But
Quick question, Jack.
Mhm.
So regarding working capital, if you get the sense that the seller should leave $50,000 and the company valued at $1 million.
Mhm.
So in this case, the buyer should pay 950 instead of 1 million because the seller would leave $50,000, or it doesn't matter.
Well, it depends on which side of the table you're sitting from, right? It's saying you're saying the same thing in different terms. So it's either the seller nets $50,000 less in his overall price, or you can look at it as the buyer pays $50,000 less in the overall price, right? So it could be, look, if they decided, hey, you go ahead and take the cash. I have $50,000 extra of my own money I can put into this. They can reduce the price by 50,000, and now I have my own working capital, right? So what we're actually trying to figure out is the net difference, right? The net difference is 950. So at the end of the day, he paid 950. The seller gets 950.
And this meeting is recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So once again, I think you're understanding it correctly. It just depends on which side of the table you're sitting on, right? If I'm sitting at the seller's table, I'm going to think, yeah, he's netting $950,000 out of the purchase. If I'm sitting with a buyer, I'm going to say, yeah, the buyer's paying $950,000 because he gets $50,000 back after he pays the $1 million.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
So Jack, the number you used here is a monthly, 1 month for
month. Yes. So I am assuming that I'm going to start getting payment for the jobs I do week 1 in 30 days.
Right. If just say like a GM used that, his example is 13 weeks, everything come back. So we need to time 3 or something like that, right?
Correct. Now that would be extremely odd if I said, oh, I do a job today and I get paid in 13 weeks. Now it does happen. So in construction businesses, if I'm a subcontractor and I'm a window installer, a lot of times I put in the work now, right? We're building a new home. I put all the windows in. Home doesn't get finished construction until in 2 months, 3 months. So my payment typically I don't get that payment until that home is completed. And so sometimes you will have some long stretches with working capital needs. That's when really a line of credit comes in. But I would say for this, we're probably talking about max 90 days out. It would be concerning if someone was buying a business that I do the work today and I don't get paid for 90 days. That would be hard to run a business. That would require a lot of cash flow, a lot of working capital to run that business. Something's not right there.
Okay.
And Jack, just a comment about the 13 weeks. In those 13 weeks, in the example I was talking about with Pallet Masters, there were only 3 weeks where cash went negative, receipts minus expenses.
Right.
1 week was negative by $2,600, which is nothing.
Right.
Another week was negative by about 36,000, and another week negative by about 40,000.
Right.
But the difference is that in those 2 weeks, there were large inventory purchases of raw materials. It's like $75,000 worth of material purchases in the week caused it to go negative by 40, and there were a big chunk in the other one. So you could look at the first several weeks of that and say, oh, I don't need any cash.
Right. Well, for your example, the good thing you had was inventory to write off against some of that cash. So if we had some inventory in this, we would probably need to include less cash, right? If there was inventory expense in here, that means I don't spend money on inventory. I can sell that inventory, earn an income from it, and then turn that over again.
In this case, the maximum negative was 40,000 over the most recent 13 weeks.
Right.
And they're including 70,000 of inventory with it. So, the buyer would want to have some cash to start out with because he's going to be paying bills right away, but he's also going to be collecting because they're depositing thousands of dollars every week. It's not lumpy like when you build a house, you don't get paid for 6 months, and then you get
now the buyer is getting some of the AR then, right? Some of the AR.
No
AR. So how do they get money when they first step into the business if they don't have AR? I have to sell the inventory to turn it into cash, right? So how long does that take me?
There are shipments going on every day in this business.
Right, but you're saying they don't get any AR. So all the shipments all the shipments that you've shipped as of the close date belong to the seller. So when I step in day one, the deposits coming in are all for the seller, not for me. So I don't get access to those deposits. I need.
But like I said, their AR never runs more than about $2,500.
Right. So where am I? Where is so on the first week, I have no income coming in yet, but I have let's say $10,000 of bills I need to pay, electricity, payroll, all that. Where does that money come from?
That's going to have to come from the buyer's working capital.
But where that's the key. Where does the working capital come from? His pockets. So buyer has to inject an extra, let's say 10 grand into the deal, right? So in my opinion, that deal cost the buyer $10,000 more. This is the key of I bought a new car, you didn't put any gas in it, I'm gonna have to pay $10 for me to just drive it off the lot. So that's the same thing, right? I'm gonna look at that as acquisition cost. That's in addition to the purchase price in that sense. And either you built it in or you could have. You probably should have, because now if I was the buyer's agent, you're capped out at that price. You're saying, I'm going to pay $1 million for this. I have to put in another $10,000. You're going to get $990. Right. Whereas maybe if you built it in, he may not have wanted to take a discount at that point. Maybe if you priced it at 1.1 with including the inventory or receivables, that question may not have come up.
Well, we did the analysis for the buyer in conjunction with the buyer's agent and the seller, and that information was communicated to the buyer before he wrote his offer.
Yeah. So if he's prepared for that,
his offer was at a bit less than full price.
Yep.
And so you can say, you got your discount.
He factored that in. So yeah,
I'm assuming that he did.
Yeah. So whether we build it into the purchase or not, a lot of times, buyers are going to, we assume buyers are just as smart as we are, right? They're getting just as good advice from their agents as the seller's getting from ours. So we would probably come up with the same conclusion overall, but just realize, I always want to prepare the seller for it, even if they're like, no, I don't want to include any of it. No, I don't want to include. I want to make sure I prepare them for the fact that I know when an offer is made, it's going to be there, so that they're not surprised when they see that, right? I don't mind if they don't want to include that in their marketing or whatnot, but I do want to make them aware so that when it does happen, they're not surprised by it. All right. So assets included, I'm going to say 50,000. There's $2,500 of fixed assets, not a whole lot. And then liabilities assumed. We're usually saying 0, right? So if we're doing that, I'm assuming this is going to be an asset sale. So none of the liability is assumed, some of the assets or all of the assets, including some cash, working capital. All right, so we'll click next. Oh no. Hopefully someone wasn't using it.
No, it times you out.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I find it very frustrating.
That's very annoying.
I didn't have everything.
Yeah. The good thing is I have all of this. Right, that's right.
And it doesn't give you any warnings that it's going to time you out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Or when someone else logs in, you're still kind of continuing to do your work, and then you realize, oh.
But even if it's just you on there, and it doesn't tell you that you can only be on that page for like 2 minutes before it times out or something. It just all of a sudden isn't there.
Jack, if you already click next, you should be able to pull it out from the dashboard and to start with
No,
where you,
maybe we'll try that towards the end, but I don't believe that's the case. I think you have to go through and finish because there is no save as you go. So you could click through everything. You can just go to the end on this. You can click, I think you can click on that.
I think I tried before. If
Okay,
as long
let's
as
see.
I click next.
Okay,
I try to save.
so I'll put whatever number in here. Let me see here. Cash 50,000. Okay, let's press next. And then we'll go back to the dashboard, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You probably have plenty of them saved there.
Yeah, let me see here. Oh, valuation, ABC
Yeah,
cabinets.
see, you have a 3.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So it does.
Yeah, it does.
So when it so when it logs you out, you want to go back in.
Yeah.
And let's make sure. Yeah. So it is in here. Okay. Good point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Wow.
I've always had to go back and just recreate. I didn't.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Just remember next. The next, the key.
You learn something every time, right? It's a good thing we're doing these. This probably saved hundreds of hours from people redoing.
So it's clicking on next will save it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, let me delete some of these so we're not confused by these. So I'll use the most. Okay, that's good. Okay, so clicking on next will save your progress. So I guess click next often. So next, 50,000 fixed assets. I think we said 25. And once again, the valuation I prefer to do here is just the market analysis. So comparables and multiples. I don't like to get into a lot of the asset value or anything like that, because once again, we're not experts on that. Okay. So the next section is pretty much just fill in the blanks at this point. And you should have everything. If you did the recast properly, all the information you'll need is on the summary page. Okay. So I'm just going to do this very quickly. 604.
In reverse order, of course. But
correct. Correct. Which is the opposite of what I learned in college, but I don't know why they always do it this way. Yeah. So be sure 2020 is on the right, where in our spreadsheets, it's on the left, or the most recent, it's on the left.
When you, Jack, when you say we're not, the asset value, you mean the current market value?
They say yes, the replacement value of assets, basically, or the current value. I don't know how much your equipment is worth, right? I can just look at your depreciation schedule. Well, that's what it is. But I'm not qualified to give opinions on what a manufacturing machine is worth.
Okay.
Can I jump in just a second, Jack?
Sure.
Jack has said this. I'll just say it a slightly different way. This report uses 3 different valuation methods: the asset method, the income method, and the market method. The asset method is looking at the value of the assets and any liabilities that are going with it as well. That generally produces a relatively low value compared to the market method, which is the seller's discretionary earnings times the appropriate SDE multiple based on the comps. So we tend to use the market method most of the time. The middle method that they use is the income method, which is also called the discounted future cash flows method. And it calls for a lot of subjective judgment on our part. And we can kind of use it, but I'm with Jack that and Ian feels this way too, that by and large, we mostly want to use the market method and give the greatest weight to that, because that's going to most accurately predict what the business will most probably sell for. The asset method is most helpful in the circumstance where maybe they aren't making much money and the value of the assets is the most valuable thing.
So the market method, you mean comparables?
Market method is comparables. Income method, we are
DCF.
Yes, we are using our estimate of various factors that would affect the value of something, and Jack will go through that, I'm sure.
You
And
know-
the asset method is just that, the value of the assets and liabilities included in the transaction.
So
Sorry,
are
one
you
for
saying you
interruption.
would eliminate that? Or because if I remember correctly, there's a weighted average, I would put a heavier weight on the market value rather than the discounted cash flow value. Am I correct?
Correct.
Right. You can either put a zero value on that,
Okay.
or you can use all three at one time.
Yeah.
The key thing is just to be awake and aware
Yeah.
of what you're doing and why you're doing it, so that
Yeah.
it
Okay.
comes out right.
This is Roy in San Jose. Asset value, are you talking about the asset value depreciated or asset value resold? Let's say heavy duty equipment there. Machinery.
There is also a whole, this essentially is recasting the balance sheet, which we at Business Team don't normally do. And the challenge of that is correctly using the correct estimated value of the equipment. The IBBA standard that they teach in their class is you want to use the current market value in place and in use. An equipment valuator can come up with that number. I can't. And that's the challenge of it.
Correct. Correct.
It just
So just say if we still in the previous page, the asset page, the asset value should be just whatever shown on the balance sheet rather than we have this estimated market value.
Correct. The prior page is verbatim of what the balance sheet shows. You don't make any changes to that. So whatever is shown on the balance sheet. So just realize there's two values we're talking about, right? Book value is purely for tax purposes, but then there's an actual value on that piece of equipment. So there's plenty of equipment that have been fully depreciated. Book value is zero, but people can still use it for 20, 30 years. Heavy machinery, they don't go bad as long as you maintain it. And so if you're going to base it on book value, guess what? It's not worth anything, right? They've depreciated it down to zero, probably less than zero at this point. But there's still usable life on that machine. And the hard part is, how do you determine how much usable life there is? And then in addition, remember, when you want to do an asset replacement, you also need to know the capitalization rates, right? So how quickly do I need to replace the equipment? A lot of data that we don't have up front, and we would purely just be guessing at that point. If it's simple equipment and I know that it needs to be changed out every single year, that's a little different story, right? But most equipment is not in that kind of shape. It's not like laptops that I'm buying and exchanging out every year.
To Jack, click next or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm going to do the last part here. So this is 60. So this is where you give the year's weight. Okay, and here I'll just click next first so it saves it. All right, and then I'm going to go back. Okay, so this is once again verbatim from your summary sheet. One of the areas, preferably you don't have 20 add backs. If you have more add backs than this allows, you're going to have to start combining some of those add backs, okay, to give it to you. But basically, you want these numbers to match your spreadsheet. Okay, so 2020, 19, and then 18. Okay, so once that's done, what you're going to want to do is put weights to each of the years, right? My rule of thumb when I first start is always 60, 30, 10. Okay, so I'll give most weight to the most recent year, less weight 2 years prior, least amount 3rd year ago. Okay, now once again, this is RR, right? So if I'm looking at 2021, 2020, and I notice 2020, everyone had a bad year, I may put very little weight on 2020, more weight on 2019 and 2021. Make sense? Okay, so if there's something that's an anomaly, we'll want to give it less weight. But just as practice, 60, 30, 10 is a pretty good ratio to start with. I think when you get into, well, why did you give it 50 and versus 55? You don't want to get into that kind of argument with the seller. So this also will help you find out what EBITDA is. So I assume a salary for someone operating a business like this, they need to make about 90 grand. So this is the EBITDA number. This is the discretionary earnings number. And a good way to, this is a way for me to explain sellers' discretionary earnings to sellers and buyers. A lot of them don't understand SDE. They've never seen it before. It's basically EBITDA plus an operator salary. Okay, so if they know what EBITDA is, you add an operator salary to that, and that's your seller's discretionary earnings. Okay.
Quick comment here. As I review people doing this, a very common mistake is that on this, in this area here, they fail to enter that negative $90,000 or whatever it is. And so they end up with an overstated EBITDA. And since the multiple for an EBITDA is always higher than the multiple for an SDE, they end up overestimating the market value of the business. You're muted, Jack.
You are muted, Jack.
Usually, exactly what Jeff said. It's also the difference in price is exactly the seller salary multiplied by the EBITDA multiple is what is overpriced by. You can also set growth rates here. Okay, so for this business, I may have said, okay, so they're growing pretty rapidly, right? They went 600, 739 to 856. So if you see something like that, you can almost just do the math and figure out what that growth rate is. I think it's about 15%, which I don't like using this because you're almost saying, okay, we're going to continue to grow 15% every single year, which is probably unlikely. Okay, so I want to stay away from any kind of projections as well. I don't like doing them because I really don't think projections really mean anything, especially in a business sale. Seldomly, when a seller does a projection, is the buyer going to be able to obtain those types of numbers? So I kind of leave that out, but just know you can put growth rates in here if you want to, project out even 4 years. But I don't recommend doing that.
So you don't do it because it's hard to forecast the future, or you don't do it because of liability issues?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
The chances of someone, oh, hey, you said you were going to do 15% more and I did negative 10%.
Yeah.
You're misleading me. So,
okay.
Yeah. And I don't want to put a seller in that position either. All right. So this is where you're reading some of the industry reports will help. Okay. This is extremely based more on your opinion and person by person. Okay. But read the industry reports so you can at least have a little bit more knowledge in this. So, each one of these has a different, this overall performance from financial perspective, erratic, inconsistent, below average performance. So these guys are actually performing extremely well against the comparables that we're seeing, high cash flow, increasing sales. So this would be extremely low risk. So I'd put it here. Quality of financial information. They have very good financials, tax returns, P&Ls. So I would say low risk. Okay. Diversification risk. This is, once again, based on your opinion. Do we have account concentration issues? Do we have supplier concentration issues? Product mix diversification. So I know no account concentration, no supplier concentration, but there is product mix. There is not a lot of product mix, right? They make cabinets, and that's pretty much it. So I might give it a little bit lower, higher risk here.
This, by the way, is for the income approach that we mentioned.
Correct.
And as you can see here, it requires a number of subjective judgments on your part to estimate what happens in the future.
Correct. And the problem I run into is when you show this to a seller, guess what? Everything is low risk. Okay. There's no risk on any of this. When you show it to a buyer, everything is high risk. And so it really is, and both of them are right? I can't, it's all based on what your feeling is in the future. So management risk, keep risk reliance on current owner. So obviously he is the contractor. It requires a contractor license. So there's a high reliance on the current owner. Industry risk. So this is where reading the report will help. Currently homes are being built all over, but there's supplier issues. So what I read in the report is, home building, remodeling, blowing up. However, people are running into supply chain issues, can't get enough raw materials. So even though the business is there, they may not be able to do the job. So I'm going to say, maybe a little bit higher risk going forward, hard to get products and so on. Competition risk. I think there's lots of competition in this industry. And so I'm going to say that's kind of high risk. Okay. So once again, you're going to have to base, I think the key thing here is if you do this part of the analysis, you need to have defensible data. Okay. So if a seller asks you, well, why did you rank it here? You can point to the industry report or point to something else. It's hard to make an argument for it. Well, I felt like giving it a high risk, or I felt like giving it a low risk. All right. So we'll go next. All right. So this is where we look at the market approach, right? So this is really where you should focus most of your time on. We're going to look for the comp that we produced. Okay, so you can pull down all the different comparables that have been done, and we're at PeerComps comparables too. Okay, so this is all the stuff that we've inputted into the prior pages. Okay, revenue, SDE, or EBITDA. Okay, these are the three types of market approach that we can use. Okay, I rarely use revenue because, as we stated, when you look at the comparables, there's companies that profited the same, but a wide range of revenue. So not very confident on using multiplier of revenue. SDE, I'm going to say this is probably where I'm going to give the most weight. Okay, it's a small business. Most likely, most buyers are going to be looking at SDE and not EBITDA. If I'm looking at a business that's doing $1 million, $2 million in SDE, then I would probably put more weight in the EBITDA because I know the types of buyers that would be looking at that is going to be looking at EBITDA versus adjusted EBITDA or SDE. But for this one, I'm going to give it 75% here and 25% there. Okay. And once again, the likelihood of someone buying this on EBITDA saying, hey, I'm going to install a manager there and run it absentee is probably very low.
Okay. But in other businesses, that might well be.
Correct. So it just depends on the industry and what your data shows. So here's the three different types of valuation we did: the asset, income, and market. Okay. So as you can see, the highest value they're going to get is market. Okay. And so I usually, at the end of this, I put 100% of the value on the market approach. Okay. Because that's what buyers are going to be looking at. And that's what is the most important. And you can show them, guess what? We did the valuation. You're going to get the most value based on the market approach. All right. And then we'll go finish. All right. So once this is done, your valuation will be, I don't know why they put this at the very bottom. You would think that the newest one would be at the top. Here. ABC cabinets and then valuation report. All right, here it is. Okay, so it makes it look nice and neat. Gives you kind of the general usage of the appraisal. I kind of don't like the fact that they use calculation of value is okay, but they put appraisal in here in a number of different areas where I would prefer them using a different type of language. You know, this really isn't going to be an appraisal. Defines all the different things that are being there. Overview of the business we inputted.
Is that a PDF file?
It is. You can download it as a PDF. Yeah, right there. Okay. Okay, and here's all those levers that we were pulling. Okay. And if you have a industry report, I would include it with this as well. So that would be your supporting data for some of the things that you did here. Okay. Financial snapshot. So this is the numbers that we put in. I would also include the recast. It's a little bit more detail than what we would get here. Okay.
Would you put that into a CBR? Or
this I would not. You know, I guess it depends. It depends. I would include it if the pricing was where it supported this. The problem is typically we produce this for a seller and the seller wants to price it higher than where we are. And so if that's the case, I don't want to include this because it then really kind of, we're basically telling a buyer, this is what you should pay on that. And we need to let the buyer make that determination. So what I presume though, is the buyer's agent would be doing something very similar to what we're doing for the sellers. And so we probably should be coming pretty close to our valuation, right? The two valuations should come pretty close. So I don't feel the need to include this in a CVR. I don't think this is really, unless, we're marketing the business at like half of what the comparables show, then yeah, absolutely, I'll include that. But typically we're listing for a value higher than what we see on these reports. So I wouldn't include it. I would leave it up to, I want the buyer's agent to do some work too. And who knows, they may come up with a higher value than I came up with, right? When we do these, we're trying to get the seller to price it in a range where it's going to get us activity, right? So we're pricing it closer to where we think. So when a buyer looks at it, they may be willing to price it a little bit higher than even where we come in. Seldomly does that happen, but.
Yeah. So Jack, how much you mark up when you list the business?
I usually say 10% range, within 10% of where we're talking about, and a good way to produce range. So we'll look through here. So a good place, when I suggest listing prices, I always give them a range. I don't tell them it's, oh, you're going to get $600,000. So I usually say, we'll do a range, and the range is determined by the comparable. So you guys, I'll download this so you, and maybe Charlene can share it with everyone so you guys have this so you can review it. But let me see where, okay. So I'll look at the comparables here, right? And I'll know that the SDE range ranged everywhere from low of 2.4 to a high of 3.3. So that's where I would price the business at. So I would look at the income, which, let's say, what did we establish? It was like 199, I think, roughly 199. And I would say on the low, or we'll say 200,000. On the low end, I would assume you should get no less than 2.4 times that. So what is that? What's that, 440? So 200 times 2.4. So 480. And then a high range, I would put 337. So 200 times 337. So 674,000. So my range for evaluation would be, I would list it anywhere between 480 to 675 or so. And I would tell them, if you give me 12 months, we'll go for the 647, right? If you're telling me I want out yesterday, then we got to price it a little bit more aggressively. At the 647, this is a full price offer. You got to finance some of it, right? 10% financing from the buyer, from the seller. If you don't want seller financing, no problem. We can list it on the lower end of the scale, right? We can go 500, 550, and maybe you can get all cash there. But that's how I play around with the ranges, right? We want to make sure we tell them, hey, if you're looking to sell immediately, we want to price it around the lowest range possible, which is that 480. If they have 12 months to wait and they want to get the highest price possible, we list it at 674. He handles, 10-15% financing. We get 20% from a buyer and 65% financing from the banks.
Hey, Jeff or Jack, this is Roy. I got a quick one here.
Sure.
You invested a great deal of time. You're using this as a closing tool for listings, and then remembering what Jeff and CABB's training was, you can't have them pay and decide to deduct this from my commission later. We cannot do that. So, and a lot of guys, I'm getting this a lot. We all do. Where I do the valuation and I never hear from them again or something like that.
Yep.
What would you normally charge for this type of tool that you have? And, assuming that you're going to put a lot of time in that, because this is you're doing a great job on this thing. I mean, what is your strategy in that? What do you charge and what do you do?
So it depends. I do it on, I mean, I typically tell people I'm going to charge them 1,500 to do something like this. I do two kinds of valuations. So let me pull up. So this is one where I know if someone is going to be using this to either negotiate a buyout of partnerships, or, hey, this is something that I'm going to be using for something else. And if I know that the likelihood of me listing this business is probably very little, I would say, yeah, pay me the $1,500. I'll do this and I'll work something like this up. If I'm trying to get a listing, I usually will do a much more dumbed down version, very simple here. Let me pull one up.
Okay.
And I don't go through all of this, right? If I'm just trying to list something, I'm not going to put in a ton. I mean, I'll put in, it still takes a lot of time, but a lot of PeerComps is really just making it look nice. It's not anything that, okay, let me see here. So I will do opinion of values and really put together, let me see if I have just a cover letter, comparables, and right here. So I'll just put together a quick letter. So I'll say, okay, based on a quick write-up. And this bypasses all of the asset value and, weighted average and all of that, right? I just explain how I did it. Took your tax returns from this year, your average discretionary weighted average or discretionary earnings, 160. We arrived at a multiple 1.5 to 2.94, and this is what I would recommend listing the business at.
Yeah.
Multiple, how I found it, 24 comparable businesses in this SIC code. And here's where I would see us, the terms and whatnot. $400,000, sell a note of 60,000 over 24 months, 7%, buyer down payment, $80,000 to $100,000.
Okay. So you're not giving them any backup then, am I right? You're not giving, you're just giving them recast.
Here's the recast and the comparables.
Okay, you do give them. Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Good.
I mean, if they're, I'll give them this information. I forgot these guys actually paid me to do this. But if I'm just trying to list something, yeah, I'll provide this. I think the key when I'm providing this for a listing appointment, it's really because I know nobody else is doing it. Right. I know that other brokers aren't really doing this. So this will give me a leg up, right? They could just take this information and just go to another broker and, well, I'm going to save 2%. You did this work for me. Great. But at the same time, it doesn't take me a ton of time, right? Once you have the recast done, it really is just pulling data for the comparables.
Okay.
Hey, Jack, would you share this file?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll share, all of that with you guys. Just give me 1 second here. I'll tell my
John. While you're doing this, excellent opinion of value letter there, Jack. Good job.
Yeah,
Very
excellent.
Good. Thank you.
Good job.
In my past life, there was a saying that if you can't impress them with your knowledge, baffle them with your bullshit. and I would largely say that Jack's letter that he just showed us is an example of impressing them with your knowledge.
Yes.
PeerComps, in my opinion, is more an attempt to baffle them with your bullshit.
Yes. And you want to I mean, I think part of this is you want to justify why they're paying you the $1,500, right? I mean, this is probably if you did 20, 30 of these and charged, $1,500 per each year, you'd be making, $400 or $500 an hour with your time, right? Yeah. It doesn't take a ton of time. And honestly, a lot of times this is actually all you really need to produce. And they're willing to pay you for it as well. The key thing here is they can't do it themselves. Okay. Yep. And the PeerComps looks good and it justifies someone paying $1,500 for it. But if someone values your data, that's where the value is, right? Yeah. This is anyone can do a recast. Anyone can put stuff into PeerComps, but not everyone has comparable data that we can pull, right? This is hard to come by. All right. Any other questions for me at this point? I think the key is play around with it. I think that's, and once again, don't be intimidated by the PeerComps website. It really is a form fill, right? It asks you questions and you fill it in. What you need to pay attention to is doing the recast and collecting the data in order to plug into PeerComps.
Good job, Jack.
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent job.
All right.
so much.
So I'll compile all the things that we use today, and then I'll put it in a folder. I'll share it with Charlene, and she can send it out for everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right. And if you guys are working on this and have questions, always give me a call. Let me know. I'm happy to help.
One other thing, just so that Jack doesn't get overwhelmed, particularly if you are new, but even if you're an old hand and you're scratching your head on this, that's why you have a team leader. Give them a call.
Absolutely.
To help with stuff like this.
Yep. And this is stuff, once you go through it once or twice, you're going to be an expert on it. So.
And we will find this meeting under grid folder or what?
That's a Charlene question.
Okay.
I could put it in there, but I'll send it out as an attachment actually to everyone.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you, Charlene.
You're welcome.
Jack, the last letter you sent, would you able to give us a editable form, like a?
Yeah, I'll send you a Word version. Yeah, no problem.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, just make sure when you're using the Word version, replace the names and the details.
If you use your name rather than Jack's.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's permanent on there. That's always on there.
Yeah.
All right. And so also just remember, people need to, if you don't know how to log into this M&A Source First Research, just get the stuff from Charlene. It has a lot of good information on there for any industry you're trying to market to.
Jack?
Great.
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Oh,
Salika.
I sent you
When do I charge? That's up to you. You know, I rarely, I don't make it a habit of charging for those, especially when I'm marketing to a business, right? So if I'm trying to get a business to list, that's what I usually say. That's the value we can provide them initially. It doesn't cost us a lot, but it sets you apart from a lot of the other brokers, right? Other brokers don't want to do any work until they're assured of getting paid. And so I think the key is you have to pick and choose. I have a lot of people that just call and say, hey, I just want to know what my business is worth. I have an idea that they're probably not going to list. And so in those cases, I will charge them. So I just recently, I think Masood, Niku actually, I think referred me a company, Unamas, the franchise. I think we sold a couple of their units at some point, and he wants to do a partnership buyout. And he wanted a valuation just to understand where he should be negotiating from. And so I knew that there was no chance of me listing that. So I did charge the guy $1,500. But I always say I'm more interested in getting that listing versus doing the valuation. And so, you know, if someone says, oh, well, you know, do the valuation for me and I'll think about listing, I'll tell them, if you list after we do the valuation, I won't charge you the $1,500. If you don't list, pay me the $1,500. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I like that. Hey, Jeff, is it legal to say on a flyer or whatever, valuation is $1,500 or worth is 15, but for the BOV study 0, it's a special offer for 30 days. Am I legal to say that?
You may not want to say it's a valuation
or BOV.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
know. So it's a $1,500 value, but for 30 days or 60 days, give me a call and I'd be happy to do it at no cost.
Yeah,
I think you could say that.
Yeah, okay. As long as you're not collecting anything, then I think it's fine, right?
No.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
and no play on the words there. I'm exactly like you, looking for a listing, but I want to put value there.
Correct. And one of the things I sometimes do is I'll just, you know, I had a mailer that went out that did pretty good. And the title of the mailer is basically, do you want to know what your company might be worth? And that's an easy way to get someone kind of thinking about that. But yeah, I use it as a tool I really use it as a tool to get listings, not really to generate income. But if I know that there's very little chance of me getting that listing, you know, I will charge them. At the same time, once again, it's your time, right? You guys use your time however you want. And, you know, I know people that always charge. I think Richard Waxman was someone that always charged for that because he felt like a lot of them that's what they wanted, right? Get the valuation done and don't need you anymore. So that is a way to tie them to it. I do like the fact of hey, we'll credit the valuation in escrow at the close. But I understand that could be kind of gray area. But I know we used to offer that, right? If someone paid for a bare valuation, we would credit them the bare valuation. If they listed it at that valuation price, we would credit them the bare valuation in escrow. The difference in that is, you know, bare isn't part of BTI Group.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you.
Roy, in any marketing kind of things, and Jack touched on this, estimating the value of a business, say for a court action or something like that, we are not qualified to do that. We don't have the right letters after our names, and so you have to be careful that you're not implying that it would be useful for that. You know, I like to use the phrase estimating most probable selling price. That is what I'm doing. As opposed to providing a valuation or appraisal or something like that.
Right. And when people come to me, that's the first question I ask them is, what is this appraisal used for? Right. Yep. If someone tells me, oh, I'm going into a lawsuit and I'm getting divorced and this needs to be produced for a judge or in court, I'm going to say my valuation is not going to stand up. Right. And so I would recommend going to a bear. But most people that are coming to us, it really is, you know, I get a lot of partnership buyouts. So someone coming to me saying, hey, I don't know how much my company is worth. I need to buy my partner out. I need to know where the starting point is. And that's typically a lot of what we do. Or you're marketing to someone, you know, like I said, one of the things I always offer is, you know, if they sound slightly interested, I say, hey, why don't I provide some value for you? I can help you understand what your business might be worth on the market. You know, typically people pay $1,500 to $3,000 for that. I do it at no charge just to build a relationship with a small business owner. And hopefully when the time is right, you'll look at the valuation, you'll give me a call and at least give me a shot at listing your business.
Right. Got it.
Sometimes it costs more than $3,000, $6,500 and $7,500.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's more than $1 million in revenue.
Yep. The funny thing is, if you've ever done a professional valuation and one that we do, I'm going to say we typically come in about 10-15% of where they come in at. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, people are using the market approach. That's really how these things are marketed. And so, you know, we're just as good as doing that. I think the valuation, they do a lot of write-up. There's a lot of narrative behind what they're doing. That's what they're paying for, is the narrative. But the numbers all pan out the same. They just have a little bit more, you know, explanation.
And Jeff, those guys you're talking about are the CBAs, the CVAs, and the AB, I think ARAs or whatever, but those are the individuals you're talking about, right?
Exactly so.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, in my previous office, the price is really individual for the valuation. We try to push those guys. They just want to do valuation only. They don't want to list the business. We try to drive them away by a higher price. So I know some of them charge $5,000, some of them charge $4,000, $3,000. Never really 1,500 because it's just very time consuming.
Yes. Now you have to also make sure they realize this is not a full valuation, you know, what they would call a narrative valuation. And for those of you that don't know, we do have a third-party service that can do those, and we can make a margin on that. So, and for us, I think it's about the same. We make about $1,500. Either we do it ourselves or we pass it on to Bear. I think our cost, I think we charge 3,500 and our cost to bear is like 1,500 or 1,700. So if you don't want to do the work, you can always do it that way. But it is a little bit more costly for the client, but they will get like a 40, 50 page valuation that I suspect they won't even read through. So
they'll read the bottom line of it. When feel free to get the maximum amount for evaluation that you can.
Yes. And once again, if it's someone that you want to list or you want to build that relationship, then definitely, I mean, look, once you get good at these, you know, it might take you an hour to do it. And if it's an hour, you know, would you rather make $1,500 or make $100,000 commission down the road? So
good information, good training. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Well, any if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, or you know, I'm happy to help if anyone needs some help walking through it.
Yep. Have a good weekend, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Bye.